All right, everyone, we are back on the Serial Optimist podcast. I have the pleasure and the honor to have Mr. Chris Mader with us today. I would love, Chris, if you want to introduce yourself or do your own little elevator pitch, I think that would be great for the audience to hear.
Sure. So, Steph, it's nice to be on. And yeah, so I am a Massachusetts native, still live in Massachusetts, and I grew up here. I went to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. I chased a career in baseball for a long time, played college and professional baseball to the age of 25. I started my business career in staffing. I worked for a staffing company doing about $30 million in 1996. Grew it to about 1.4 billion in 2016. I then moved on to locum tenens staffing. Steph, you and I worked together there, which is how we know each other. I did that for about 7 years. I then went on to be a chief revenue officer, interim CEO for a healthcare IT company. But all the years in business in corporate America, I always wanted to be a coach. And I was very fortunate to have an event where I could start my own company about a year and a half ago as an entrepreneur. So at the very young age of 53, I became a first-time entrepreneur and started my own company. I'm a company of one plus a paid intern that I found through my alma mater at Rollins, and love what I do. And I currently specialize in executive coaching, leadership coaching, sales training, and keynote speaking.
I love that. That's a really good pitch, which makes sense because of who you are. And it's funny because I was just telling you, obviously before we started this podcast that for everyone listening to, Chris and I had worked together in different silos at a healthcare staffing company. And I had left in 2018, but I had the pleasure of connecting with Chris through all the different channels within the company. And I remember just sitting in your office one time and I can't even remember what the conversation was exactly, but I think it was career because I had just transitioned from recruiting for 4 years into a sales position. And I really didn't know what I was doing. And like I knew like I could have conversation. Um I knew the vision of the company. I just didn't really know where I was going. And I think I came to you for some advice because everyone said you were kind of like the internal coach of the company. And I just remember that conversation like it was yesterday. Like you really inspired me. And I was like, ironically, I realized I actually wasn't in the right seat at that time during that conversation where I was like, this is actually not where I should be. And it's not fair to the company, me knowing that now. And now I have to figure out my transition plan.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you say, because I always felt, even though if I work for a company, even though I'm getting a salary from that company, I've always been trained to do the right thing for people. And if you always look out for the other person's best interest, that's always the right way to approach things. Because if somebody isn't happy, then why would you want to make them stay somewhere where maybe they're not the right fit or they're not happy? It's not the right thing for them. So I've always taken the approach that business cards can change, but relationships don't. And if you do the right thing for people, that things always work out, the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, no, I am so all about that. And I'm very fortunate that my management team when I was at that company was extremely supportive. I mean, I think I was having somewhat of a quarter life crisis because I had gone from sales in, like phone sales through college and then to healthcare locum tenens recruiting. And I had done basically back to back sales recruiting for 6 or 7 years. And I was only 26, 27,
Yeah.
and I was really starting to realize like who do I want to be, what do I want to
Right.
like be when I grow up. And
Right.
they were all really supportive of me making that change, and it was with a heavy heart because I had grown to love everyone there, the company. I'd
Right.
grown so much as a person, but it was the perfect time for me to kind of spread my wings and fall on my face actually outside of it, because there comes a time where you grow and you're in a position where you actually almost get a little comfortable in a company if you've been there long enough where you don't fall on your face because people just, oh, you're going to do this, you can do this, and you get all the resources where in life that doesn't necessarily always happen. And I was very fortunate that I had a great management team that helped me grow to a level where I was like, okay, it's time to leave. It's time to figure out what I want to do, and it's not going to be pretty. And that's what I did, and I'm glad I did
Yeah.
because now I have my own business, which
Yep.
I'm very fortunate for.
And I'm not surprised. And yeah, you were successful there. And to your point, you had to follow your heart and follow your passions.
Yeah, yeah, no, and yeah, exactly. So I think for you, Chris, I would love to hear more about your business now, what you're doing, like who are like the people that you work with? And I wouldn't be surprised if it was probably people similar to me, small businesses or maybe even larger companies. I don't actually know. So I'd love to hear like who's your audience now and then tell us more about this book that just came out.
Yeah, I grew up in business development, so I do sales coaching. That's about a third of my business. The other two-thirds of the business, which I'm really passionate about, is leadership coaching. So I do one-on-one executive coaching. My typical clients are 3 million in revenue to 100 million in revenue. So it's kind of the smaller to mid-sized companies in corporate America that they're not big enough where they have a training department, but they have enough money where they want to invest in their people. And so they hire a consultant like myself to do either executive coaching in the C-suite, or what I really enjoy doing is new leader training. I think, Steph, you and I did a little bit of that back in the day.
Yeah.
I really love helping leaders that were individual contributors, are successful at their job, they get promoted to management, and they haven't been trained. They just literally
Yeah.
don't have the controls of what is leadership, what is management, what do I need to do. So the favorite thing I like to deliver is this 9-month cohort-based training where I grab 8, 10, 12 leaders together in a group in a company and bring them through a training experience to create a similar language, get them on the same page, collaborating. So I really enjoy doing that. And as I started my business, everybody said, Chris, you should write a book. So I started to write a book last May, and I thought the book was going to be about leadership. And the book ended up becoming more of a motivational memoir around my journey of change through my career in baseball to corporate America to being an entrepreneur and all the ups and downs of that. I mean, I was very vulnerable and opened the book around not, I reference the successes to show that what you can attain, but I show a lot more about the failures and the setbacks. And
Yeah.
the name of your podcast is interesting because in high school, I was literally nominated the most optimistic person at Tewksbury High School in 1988. So I do believe optimism is a superpower in life because there are going to be setbacks that happen. I don't call them failures. I put this in my book that I don't think I failed at anything in my life. I had lots of setbacks, lots of road bumps, speed bumps, things that got in my way, obstacles, bad decisions, whatever. But I always say you either win or you lose or you learn. And if you lose, there's something to be learned from that. And you also talk about, discomfort. Growth comes from a place of discomfort. So sometimes the best place to grow is when things don't go well
Yeah.
and you self-reflect and figure out how you're going to get out of the hole that you might have created.
I mean, you just said like 100 nuggets I could talk about right now because I think you're so right. I mean, my optimism truly comes from so many setbacks. I feel the same way. And it's funny because I reference a very well-known female entrepreneur, Sarah Blakely, and she
Yeah.
used to always tell this story on her podcast and like interviews that her dad would ask her, what did she fail at this week? What did she fail at? Which meant she tried something new. And I think so many entrepreneurs and just people in general, no matter where they are in their career, are so afraid of that word failure and what's going to happen. And I'm like, honestly, I shoot from the hip and I move really fast. I'm actually that my superpower is I'm very decisive. I do not dwell on anything. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna make the decision. People are like, are you gonna like think about it more? And I'm like, nope, let's just do it because I know and I've learned through my own experience the faster I make a decision, the faster I'll learn, oh shit, that actually did not work out the way I thought it was going to. Or I learned like, okay, now I know this actually worked really well. I just need to tweak it. And so I think there's so much learning and resilience that you gain through setbacks that actually just make you a better person. It makes you stronger. It makes you better at everything that you do.
Yeah.
Um, one thing that I wanted to talk about that I think you brought up right in the beginning of that is, and I find it really funny how society does this. If you're a really good individual performer, they're like, you're going to be a great manager. And I don't necessarily think that's true. I would love to hear your perspective on that. Like, why do you think that is? And is there a way to, like, is there a time where you're like, no, this person is just really good at, dependently or independently performing and they're just not management material? Like, how do you decipher that?
Yeah, there's two ways to look at it. Steve Jobs once said that he used to believe, especially in engineering technology, that you need to have some subject matter expertise to be a good leader and understand the nuts and bolts of what you're doing, which I get what he's saying, but I would say this. I do believe you have to be in the top third of your peer group in whatever role you have to go into leadership, because at some point you have to be able to, you want to garner the respect of your team that you've been there, you've done
Yeah.
that, you know how to do the role to some degree. Now, with that said, leadership in a nutshell is getting things done through people. So What is different, Steph, to your point, is the competencies that you had as an individual contributor are very different when you become a leader. And leadership really is getting things done through people. Leadership is about connecting. Leadership is about understanding the individual goals of their team. Like, what do you want? What do you expect in the role? Is
Yeah.
that aligned to the company goals? And how do I communicate that vision? So at the end of the day, leadership competencies are oftentimes very different than the competencies required in some sort of individual contributor role, which is exactly to your point.
I know my skill set, and that's just something that I, one, don't enjoy doing, and two, I actually don't think I'm great at it. And so I think I'm almost too independent and I'm too hands off, that I am not enough of the hand holding type, where I struggle with people and staff in general where they need a lot of hand holding. And that's not a knock on them.
Well, and what you're talking about is emotional intelligence. I mean, just having that level of self awareness is a strength. And the second thing is, to your point, you want to have people around you with complementary skills. You know, you probably don't want to hire 10 people exactly like you. You want to have diversity of thought. You want to have people that approach problems differently as you're running a company and you're scaling a company, because you do want to have people that offset. You know, I'm certified in DISC as a personality assessment. And
Mm,
if anybody's familiar with it, what's always interesting about it is, you know, there's a DISC on a grid, but the diagonals are always the opposite. So to your point, like I know I'm a high on the disc, which means the C complements me. Now I will tell you, when I first work with a C, it's usually like a battle because we don't see things the same way. But
yeah.
I've learned that I want to leverage them for certain things, and they can leverage me for certain things based on my strengths and skills, and I can leverage them on their strengths and skills.
I'm pregnant and going to be going on maternity leave at some point. And so I don't know if you knew that.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
right. That's
I
great.
will be going on maternity leave in March. And I had no plan of this. And so now it's
Right.
forced me to be, instead of working 80, 100-hour weeks, which is normal and I love doing,
Right.
I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm going to have a baby. I can't do that. And I'm going to probably have to take time off. So I've had to look at my business in a way now where, okay, I'm actually a leader. I can't be so hands on in the day to day. And my team has really stepped up, and I put them in really great roles that they like. It works for them and it works for me. But now I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm like, I have to be a leader now. Now I have to actually make sure everyone's trained, make sure everyone is taken
Yep.
care of, they're getting the right support they need, and that they can continue on this momentum. Because what so many small business owners, I think, don't know, or they figure out maybe the hard way, is I have this great product or service, we have the team, we're going to do the work, but there's so much other nuances internally that have to happen and to be managed, or you can lose sight of stuff so fast, of like an unengaged employee, especially if you're remote, unengaged, or they don't like the role. It's like, if you don't ask these questions, you're not doing active like listening and active follow-ups, you can miss stuff so easily.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So, you know, some of the things you're saying, I had a leadership coach a long time ago who asked me what my end goal was as a leader. And obviously some of the answers are, you know, successful business, my clients are happy, we're attaining our goals. Like those are the obvious answers. But he said something to me that was really funny. He goes, Chris, your end goal for you specifically should be all the people are in place, the systems are in place, the processes are in place, and you get to a point where you walk into work one day and you're bored. And I'm
Mm,
like, what do you mean? He's like, because everything's working, you did your job. You hired the right people, you trained them, the systems work, the processes work, everything's kind of running itself, and then you can scale your business. So he goes, the day you walk into work bored is when you can add the next service or add the next layer of your
yeah.
business. And I just thought that was a really interesting way to look at leadership. Like, oh, you want to be bored? Like that's the end game? I mean, it kind of is for a short time. Like come into work for a week or two and be bored, and then figure out the next phase.
Well, I think it allows you to get creative again. It allows you to figure out what the next move is. We actually just went through that in a very short period of time, when I decided to basically like scrap our internal process and rebuild it from the ground up. And we've spent the last like 8 weeks doing that basically. And then I'm like, I handed off like 80% of my day to day. That allowed me, now I'm like, wait, what do I do now with all this time? And it allowed me to obviously network, and we're building out to get some, higher, I'd say like bigger clients than what we typically had before, that we now have the bandwidth for and we have the structure for. Because before it's like we could do we could handle this type of client level, the mid-size, medium enterprise level, kind of your clientele size, 3 million plus. we could handle that as far as doing the work, like content, social media, etc. But the internal process was going to be very messy and clunky. And I promised myself always that my customers always come first and my employees. And I'm like, I don't want to go into it and be a mess and then be like, all right, Steph's content's great, but her team is a mess. Like they're not professional. This isn't working the way that it should. So that's what I really have focused on. And then now it's like, we can actually try to get those clients. We're in the negotiation with quite a few really, really big clients. And then I started this podcast, and everyone's like, "Oh, you have all this free time." It's like, no, I'm just more efficient with my time now, and I'm being smarter with it and utilizing my team better, who wanted more hours, who wanted to be more involved. And I didn't realize it. I had a lot of very frank conversations of like, where do you want to go? Do you want to be here? Do you love your job? Like, tell me honestly what you want. And
Mhm.
everyone was like, we love it. I want more hours. I want to be more involved. I'd love to be more hands on with the clients. And it was literally like the perfect answer for my team for me to then go on to that next level.
I love it. Well, and I love those, I call them connectedness conversations where you're making it more about them than the business. Just like, what's important to you? What are your goals? Help me understand your career aspirations. Is that aligned to what we're doing here?
Mhm.
Making sure obviously you're hiring for character, core values of your company, things like that. Because yeah, the problems always present themselves in business, but if you hire the right people with good character, aligned to your core values, you'll solve the tactical stuff.
Yeah,
And leadership is about hiring smart people and getting out of their way and letting them work. So
right.
that's why I keep talking about people, process, technology. If you hire the right people, you have the right process, you have the right tech stack, you can kind of wind them up and let them go. And as you build trust with them.
Exactly. And I say that to so many clients that like when we do pitch meetings with or even internally, I'm like, my team is better at content than me, and they should be. Like
Right.
I hire people who are better at it than me. Can I do everything? Absolutely. I can do like you said, like you should be able to do every single role in the company. Should I do it? No. And, is there a better way? We've done really great work with a lot of our clients, but I've noticed already, I'm like, we've improved just by hiring. We had a couple new hires where I'm like, this was the best decision for the company. And this just makes things so much more sense. But what you just said just a few minutes ago about hiring the right talent and hiring smart people, I think there's also understanding what your core values are as a company is so important because it's going to be different than the next person. Like for us, we move very quickly. We have a lot of stuff going on at once. I mean, we're publishing hundreds of pieces of content a week minimum. And if you're not kind of like ready to go with it and you're more lackadaisical, it's not going to work for our team. Like our team is very eager. They want to learn. They're young. They're like want to be a part of something that's kind of growing. And we had an employee that we had hired that she nailed the interview like everyone does. And then I realized I didn't do a great enough job on the front end. And this is no knock to her because she does everything look great on paper. And she was very smart, but she wasn't the right personality type for this business that we're scaling. And that's where we were like, we have to take a step back and we have to look at my mentor has told me this. He's like, hire slow, fire fast. He's
Correct.
like, take your time when you're hiring to make sure it's really the right fit. But if you know they're not the right fit, that will
Yeah.
destroy your internal culture and your company faster than anything. Get rid of
Right.
them.
Right. No, and you're right on. I mean, my company is I'm starting to scale. I need growth mindset. I need people that are lifelong learners, always looking to get better. To be honest, those are my best clients. I mean, I've had a couple of pitches, Steph, to your point, where I pitched a client, they want to hire me. I've actually said, you're not ready for me because they're not ready to make a change. My tagline of my company is make the adjustment, and it's taken from my college baseball coach. And make the adjustment was this tagline around your behaviors, the good things that happen to you because of what you do, the bad things that are happening because of what you do or don't do. And you're the one who has to make the adjustment and make a change. And so when I talk to clients, I actually have an intake survey I do. And I'll say, what is your readiness to make the adjustment on a scale 1 to 10? I've had clients say 6, 5. I'm like, you're not ready to work with me. Like, I
Yeah.
need you understanding that you need to make a change. I need you to be self aware enough to say, I need to change because I can't do anything. Any training I do is basically useless. Take the money and throw it in the trash because
Mhm.
unless you're actually ready and willing to accept change, you're not going to change. So all of my trainings with clients almost always start with leading change and emotional intelligence, because if you can't get your head wrapped around those concepts, it doesn't matter what I tell you, it's just going to go in one ear and out the other.
Self-awareness and emotional intelligence was is probably one of the best skills that I learned early on, and I didn't have it. I think it was something that when I was probably like late teens, early 20s, I think most people don't have. That's okay. And if you
Yeah.
do, like you're ahead of it. But I remember at the company that we were at, we talked a lot about emotional intelligence, and I read I think it was the emotional intelligence book that they gave us.
EQ 2.0, right? EQ 2.0. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that and it changed my life. And
Yeah.
so now I'm so hyper self-aware of things, of how I am and how I impact people. But I think as a leader, I think it's so spot on to do some type of like questionnaire intake form in the beginning because there are I mean, we've learned the hard way too, where we had a client that was just not ready for us and we took on the business then we when we should have walked away, and then it ended up not working out for them or for us where they, whatever however it kind of came to be, it just really wasn't a good fit. And now, we're turning away business right now that's just, we know, like, you're not ready for this service because you're not there yet, and you also don't respect what we do.
Yeah.
And marketing is that kind of fun, fine line between sales and marketing. Everyone thinks, oh, you're doing social media, we're going to get all these sales. And I'm like, no. I'm like, it's brand awareness, it's building up your brand, it's your reputation, it's connecting with your clientele, with your audience, with maybe your employees.
Right.
But if you want to use it as a sales funnel, there's a very specific thing that you have to do with that. And that's not just social media. It's so easy for someone to just like, oh, here's all my money, make more sales for us.
Well, you also articulate something earlier too. Like emotional intelligence is something that's proven that we can improve as human beings. So once you become self-aware and make a choice to change and get better, we can do that. And so IQ, you can improve your IQ. You have to read a lot, and it's really hard to improve IQ, which is more cognitive and problem solving.
Mhm.
EQ is self awareness, self control, how you influence people. And those are all skills that we learn throughout our lifetime. So to your point, some people, maybe they're born with a certain DNA of EQ that's higher than others, but it doesn't matter because as you grow, as a professional, as an adult, we can all get better. I mean, I'm 54 years old and I'm still looking to improve in certain areas of EQ. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the beauty of emotional intelligence is you can always get better. You can choose today to change your behavior and improve.
Well, and I think that comes from honestly having really uncomfortable situations and conversations, which for me, that was me in my early 20s. I was a spitfire. And I mean, I still kind of am, but I was like a
I
no BS.
remember.
Yeah, you remember. I was a what, like, to me, I look back and I cringe a little because I was like a wildcat. Like I would come in guns a-blazing, and I really, to be honest, didn't take the time to have the self-awareness to realize what I was saying or doing that would impact maybe the next person next to me. I was definitely more selfish in my early 20s, and I think through a lot of coaching on with, management, and then even just like doing therapy and realizing like a lot of this is like my own internal battle that I'm trying to just like throw out there because I'm trying to compensate for areas that I'm not feeling great about. And I did so much inner work, and that really allowed me to sit back and realize like when you say something like that to someone, that's very hurtful. And
Right.
it's maybe you didn't mean it that way, but you have to be thoughtful of how you position things. And, there's
Well,
just so much with EQ that people can
yeah.
learn
Well,
from.
and even what you're saying there in my book, I talk about intent versus impact. So to your
Yeah.
point, there's studies show that 86% of human beings are well intentioned, right? And I've known you long enough. You're I know you are. But, but if you always say to people, like you get in a conversation, you get in an argument, if I hurt your feelings, the weak way out is, well, Steph, I didn't intend to hurt your feelings. If the impact is I hurt your feelings, it's actually my fault. Like I
Mhm.
can't just be a scapegoat and be like, well, I didn't intend to hurt your feelings. Like you're being too sensitive. It's like, that's actually not the way to look at emotional intelligence. I should be
Yeah.
the one to say, hold on a second. Like I didn't intend that. The impact is clear to me that I impacted you in a way I shouldn't have. And that's actually my fault. I need to learn how to communicate with you better and give you feedback in a different way because that's what a highly emotionally intelligent person would do. Someone with low
Yeah.
EQ would just be like, ah, you're too sensitive and just kind of brush it off. And that's not the way to look at that.
No, no, especially from like business leaders, you have to know that every person is going to perceive information differently. Like my team is very diverse and they take information differently. And so that was something I had to learn so fast of, okay, for me, I am traditionally way more masculine in my approach. I'm very direct and a little bit more on the cold side when I deliver, when realizing I have to be warmer. And it's not that I'm cold, like everyone knows I'm very nice and warm. But when it comes to like serious conversations, I had to learn how to maneuver that. And even in my own relationship, where he's like, "You're being so direct." I don't like, it's not a bad thing, but there is a finesse to it that you
Yeah.
have to gain through. Okay, it's not about what you said, it's how you say it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really funny, actually, I just had a deja vu of where a big EQ moment happened for me was actually an HR training. And it was on like, I think it was on like sexual harassment or just harassment in general. And it was like, it doesn't matter if you weren't intended to be that way, but if that person was uncomfortable or uncomfortable working environment, they were right. And that changed something for me where I never, thankful I really haven't had a lot of experience with that, but it allowed me to think like, if it doesn't matter if I wasn't trying to hurt them, if I hurt their feelings, I hurt their feelings.
Correct. Absolutely right. Absolutely. And again, it takes a lot of maturity and it takes a lot of self-reflection to say, I'm the one that was the problem in that interaction. It's really hard for people to do. I've made the joke recently. I was talking to my wife about this. I talk about motivational talks and things. And one of the slides I have is a mirror. And I talk about how if there's a problem you have, you look in the mirror, it's like you're the problem. And
Yeah.
she goes, Chris, that is not very motivational. I'm like, well, but the motivational part is, but the person in the mirror is also the solution. Like you're the one that can fix it. But you have to
Mhm.
admit that there was wrongdoing or an area of growth that you have where you have to get better and you have to take ownership of your behaviors and what you say and what you do. And it's incredibly difficult for people because it's easier to stay the course. It's easier to not change. I talk a lot in the book about change. People fear change. They fear it because they
Mhm.
don't want to fail. They fear the unknown. They don't want to look foolish. There's all these reasons why people don't change. And it's really fascinating human behavior because we all know change happens every day in this world. I mean,
Yeah.
we can talk from politics a week ago all the way back to technology 50 years ago. I mean, I sold in a world without computers in 1996, right? So think about AI now. It's like from selling pre-computer to now AI is involved. If I don't adapt with the times, I become the dinosaur. So I continue to adapt. And I think that's a really healthy human behavior to have.
No, absolutely. And I think you really pinpointed something that I see a lot, especially in younger generations and just in my generation in general, is there's a huge shift culturally right now where there's kind of this victim mentality where it's like, well, I did what I was supposed to do. And it's like at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you did in this situation, but if you're still not getting the outcome that you want, it's up to you to make the change. It's up to you to actually course correct. And I talk about that a lot because I'm like a change addict. I used to be so afraid of change, and then my career has changed a lot. I've gone through a lot of change just living. I mean, where I'm living, I've lived in multiple states. I've changed, relationships. I've grown a lot, and it was always because I knew there was something that I could keep improving and getting better at. And I think once you kind of get in that mentality and that kind of wheel, it's change is not actually that bad. I'm like, I'm all for it now. And you just kind of go for it. And then your life just continues to improve.
Yeah,
But you have to get out of that mentality that, like, oh, it's on someone else. Like, no one's going to save you but yourself. No one's going to
correct.
help you but yourself. And if you're
Yeah,
not willing to do the work, well, good luck.
correct. No, it's well said. And even, I have 3 kids and I tell them that too. Like sometimes they're afraid of trying. And I'm like, just
Mm,
do it. You're either going to pursue something and it's going to work, or you're going to pursue something and it's not going to work, but you're going to learn something. So that's a win. So either way, don't be paralyzed by the fear of what if it doesn't work, or,
yeah.
it takes courage to try things. And only good things happen from trying. Like even if it goes well, you succeed. If it goes wrong, you learn something, you move on. But that might be a skill that you apply 5 years down the road. You never know, but you have to put yourself in those situations.
100%. Like I truly think every single thing that we do, there's a lesson somewhere in there, and that's what you can take from it to apply it in a way that you didn't even realize. Like there's stuff that I learned from cheerleading when I was in high school that I've recently applied to something in my business. It's like there's these little nuanced things that you learn, and I think as soon as
Yeah.
people get out of their own way and just go after it and do what they have to do, the hard work internally, externally, I think their lives are going to improve, and I think we'll see that hopefully in the new year. I'm so optimistic. I'm just like it's the new year. Maybe everyone's going to feel a little bit better, more optimistic about the new year and what they're going to do. But at the end of the day, like the new day or the new year starts today with you. It starts with you making better decisions. It starts with you figuring out how to live the best life you can. And at the end of the day, like I remember my one of my best friends told me this, and it shook me when she told me this a couple of years ago. And she's like, I have no regrets. And I look at every single day and I think, if I died today and I look back on my last day on earth, would I be proud of myself? And I remember I cried at the time because I was not in a good place. And I was like, I would not be happy with what I just spent my time on. I was worrying about things. I was just like spending my like energy on things that really didn't matter. And now it's like I am proud every single day. I try to do something, we're not perfect. Not every day is going to be perfect, but I think if you just try to have a mentality that's going to serve you and others
Yeah.
in a positive way, like there's no sky's the limit.
Yeah, I mean, you even summed up in a lot of ways, the book I just wrote, the title is Make the Adjustment. The subtitle is Finding the Courage to Go on Your Own Journey of Transformational Change. And to your point, I've lived lots of change these past 5 years. I mean, lots of changes the last 50 years, but I had to have the courage to leave a job and start a company. I had to have the courage to look in the mirror and say, Chris, you're not happy with your fitness level. You have to make some changes and make the adjustment. I wasn't happy in certain relationships, so you have to make these cognitive choices and then change your behaviors. And like I said, looking in that mirror sometimes is the most difficult thing, but it's the best thing you can do to say, okay, transparently, be honest with yourself, be brutally honest. Are you where you want to be? And Steph, to your point, I bought a calendar a few years ago called My Life in Weeks. And it's one of those calendars you fill out one box per week. And
Oh
I basically anticipated, hopefully, I live to at least 88. So there's 88 years with 52
my
weeks.
gosh.
My calendar is about 60% complete. I have 40% left. But I bought that calendar 3 years ago. Every week I leave work on Friday, I fill out a box. I've had zero regrets in 3 years, zero. And I had
Mm-hmm.
lots of regrets the probably 7 years before that.
Yeah.
And so to your point, I'm living my life the way I want to live my life. And yeah, there's certain challenges with some of those decisions I made, but I've made those decisions. I've welcomed them. I've embraced them and I have no regrets.
I love that for you. I think that's really cool. I actually, do you know Jesse? It's Jesse Itzler. He has like the he has a yearly calendar, but it's a year. And basically you can break down like he basically wants you to do as much as you can in a year. So it's
I've
not just
seen that. I didn't know his name.
yeah,
I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm actually thinking about getting it because it basically like okay, you almost like force yourself to plan like I'm going to do something outside activity like fun or whatever every month or every quarter. And then you kind of map out all these things and all of a sudden he's like you've literally had the most transformative fun year but also challenges like maybe I'm going to do a 5K or half a marathon something like that. But I think you are such an inspiration because I hate when people say like, "Oh, I'm not in my 20s anymore. It's too late." I'm like, people start businesses at 30, 40, 50, 60, even 70. And I think, you're still so young, but to some people they're like, "Oh, if you're not, starting a business at 30, like it's too late now." I think what do you say to those people and like really what was maybe the defining moment for you to make that change to start your own business?
Thanks for asking the question. It's a great question. I found there was an article somewhere that said men between the age of 40 and 50, which was my age group a couple years ago, the reason they were becoming entrepreneurs is they were successful in business, but they still felt like they were being micromanaged. And
Mm,
so, I don't need a boss telling me how to manage my day or do certain tasks. I'm an expert at what I do. I know what I'm doing.
yeah.
And so when my team is outperforming all the other teams in the same company by 50%, and I'm still being told I have to work until a certain time. Like, hold on a second. Like, we're
Yeah.
driving results. Like, I don't need to be micromanaged. And so you get to a point in your career as an adult where you say, oh, I know what I'm doing. Like, why am I doing this for somebody else? I can do this for myself. And that was a realization I had 18 months ago. I'm like, Chris, why are you doing this for other companies? Like, you have a network of people that would work with you. You know what you're doing. You're considered to be an expert in leadership and sales coaching. Like, just do it. Like, take the risk. And so, there's a book called Burn the Boats. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I read it during my entrepreneurial journey. It's basically about the Spanish Armada and the general. They're fighting this war and this battle. They come off the boats and they're losing badly. And the general says, burn the boats. And one of his soldiers goes, why would I burn the boats? And he goes, because if you don't have plan B and you stick with plan A, we will succeed. And they ended up winning the battle because they burned the boats. And so I've taken on this mindset of, I've had companies call me to hire me. And that's very, that's great. It's humbling. I appreciate it. But I don't want to work for anybody else. I want to work for
Yeah.
myself. So
Yeah.
I've kind of figuratively burned the boats. Like, I didn't want to look at another job as a safe place to go for income. Like, I am not
Yeah.
making now what I made 2 years ago. But to your point, I have a $500,000 plan, and I have a plan to get there in the years to come.
Yeah.
And I believe in myself that it's going to happen. I'm trying to manifest it. And honestly, the first 2 years of my business have gone probably better than I thought it would.
Yeah.
Financially, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm better off than I thought I'd be. So, but I've never been happier.
I love that. And I think I need to read that book. That sounds great.
In the
I
boats.
I think I think so many people, it's really funny because I think there is this preconceived notion that a corporation is more secure than a startup or your own business. I do think there's obviously both sides to that. There's definitely a lot of risk when you start your own company. There's a lot of risk that you see every day within your own business, but you look at across the board, layoffs happen all the time. You can get fired
Mhm.
at any time. I think there's something about controlling your own destiny. And I was in a similar position as far as feeling like micromanaged. I was being micromanaged in quite a few different roles. And I was always someone who was top performing. They're like, well, it's because you're being micromanaged. I'm like, no, because I'm trying to show you that I don't need to be micromanaged because I can do this job. And I remember my last like really like corporate job. I just was feeling so underutilized for my skill set. And I'm like, I'm always someone that was trying to do more outside of what my job description was, which was to a fault. A lot of people are like, oh, we'll just add it on. We can just do more. I'm like, but I could do that for my own company. I like operations. I love marketing. I love sales. I love having conversations and building something. It made sense for me to start my own company. But I think so many people are afraid to make that switch. And I'm really proud of you because I think they don't realize like what it means when you make that switch. Yes, you're going to work a lot more. You're probably going to make less, but in the beginning, and
In the
you're going
beginning.
to figure that out. And then you start to realize, oh, wow, this is my future. I'm in control of it. You get to call the shots. You get to work with the type of clients you want to work with. You're not forced to work with people who really aren't serving or really end up not just being a good fit for you emotionally. And
Right.
I think that was something for me in my last two jobs. I kept having to work with people who I just really, um, from like a moral standpoint, an ethical standpoint, and um, just styles, I was like, this isn't a fit for me. I can't, it's hard to be forced to be around people who we just have very different views on
Yeah.
life. And I'm all for diversity, but there comes a point where sometimes it can be really toxic. And I was like, I want to control my own work environment. I want to be able to be remote. And that's not so I can just sit on my couch and work. But some days, like I'm pregnant. If I wasn't in this company now, like my own business, I think about that because my first trimester was awful. Like it was terrible. And so I remember just crying to my now soon to be husband.
Yeah.
And I just was like, I'm so fortunate that I
Yeah.
can go lie down for a couple hours. I can come
Mhm.
back and I can work
Yeah.
throughout the day and get all my
Yeah.
stuff done, that
Yeah.
flexibility. But I always laugh when people are like, oh, I want to quit my 9 to 5 so I can make my own hours. And I'm like, you're going to work 24/7 when you own your business because that's just how
Yeah.
it goes.
Well,
At
you
least,
have to your point, you're nailing it. You have to love what you do, and you have to be an expert. Like, I've known you
yeah,
long enough. You're an expert at what you do, and you work so hard, and you have all these great traits. But like, there's that. The other book is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000
yeah,
Hours to Mastery. So for younger
mhm,
people, you have to try new things. But at some point, once you find the thing you like, go master it. And once you
yeah,
master it after 3 to 5 years, you can break out your own 25, 28, 34, 54, it doesn't matter. It's like, but you have to be an expert and you
Hmm.
have to know what you're doing because once you have the expertise, like you said, you'll start to figure out all the other things. But if you have a product or service that you know you're in the top third of, you can be successful as an entrepreneur.
No, that's 100%. And I see that with a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs where they're almost like that squirrel, like shiny ball syndrome, and they're
Yeah.
doing all these different things. And I'm like, one of the best books I ever read was called The One Thing. And when you focus on the one thing, I can't remember who the author is of that. Um, but did you ever read that book, The One Thing?
No, I don't know that one.
Yeah, it's a game changer, especially for people who have like pretty bad ADD or ADHD, which is me. And so I was one of those people. I was spread thin, and I that was always like I was a top performer, but I always got that comment in my reviews was, you're really good at what you do. However, you'd be even better if you weren't so scattered in all these other things. And for me, it wasn't, it was almost like it was a great lesson because I realized that one, I was, and they were right. But two, I also wasn't focused on the one thing that was really fulfilling me. And I was still trying to find that. That's why I was trying to find fulfillment in other places and kept driving that. And then as soon as I really started focusing in on marketing, in the sales aspect, I was like, oh, I'm home. This is where I'm meant to be. I can go in because with marketing, there's so much diversity within it. And I really started to master social media. Social media was something that I was a user of as, just an average person. And I really started to master it from the business level. And now we know strategy very well. We understand how to implement plans for these companies and also implement influencer marketing. What does that look like? We have a hired influencer that's on staff with us that we know inside and out the different nuances of how companies can utilize that. And so I think to your point, it's great to try a lot, and I'm an example of that. I've tried a lot of different areas, but one thing has been very clear in my path is I've been very consistent at relationship building and figuring out a way to kind of mold that into now my career in marketing, which I love and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And that's why I think the business has been successful. It's because I've
Yeah.
focused on this one thing the last two
Yep.
years.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like you said, you have to know what you're good at. And,
Hmm.
for me, it was the three things I was told I was good at through the years was leadership training, sales training, and public speaking. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, well, there's my first three offerings in my in my business, and that's pretty much what I deliver. 99% of my business is leadership training, sales coaching, and keynote speaking.
I love that. No, I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Chris, for doing this call. I think, in this podcast with us, I think you are such a like a breath of fresh air, but also a wealth of knowledge. And I would love for you to plug in where people can get your book because I think everyone should read it. And I'm going to be literally reading this weekend. So I'm so excited. And please tell everyone where they can get it.
Of course, I so my company is MTA Consultancy, but that can be a handful. So I also bought the website for maketheadjustment.com. So maketheadjustment.com will take you to my website. My book link is there. My book can be found on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, and it's kind of Audible. So I'm actually doing the reading for Audible right now, which is pretty wild to be narrating my own book.
I
I had to,
love that.
I had to pass a test with my editor to make sure I had the right voice inflection to read, but to your point about control, I wanted to enunciate certain parts of that book. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's really exciting to have written a book that is very meaningful to me. The message is very meaningful. It's very personal, vulnerable. A bunch of stories that I think anybody can relate. I tell people, I thought I was going to write a leadership book, and it's a book that you can read, my wife can read, my kids can read, a CEO can read. It doesn't matter. It's really just somebody that's willing to take that journey of change, whether it's in their personal life or their business. And I know that the lessons will be helpful and useful for people.
No, I'm so excited to read it. I was planning on reading it before our episode and then just life happened and I'm like, nope, but I'm gonna order it and I'm gonna read it this weekend because everything you've told me about it and what I've read about it, I'm like, this feels like this is actually a really good time for me to take this in and be able to kind of because there's a lot of adjusting I'm doing right now and change. And so I think it's going to be really helpful. So anyone else that's looking for that, absolutely let me know. If you for some reason can't find the link, just message me and I will send you right to Chris. But thank you so much, Chris, for being on today.
It's great to see you, and thanks for letting me speak to your audience today. Thanks, Steph.